gonna show you guys this disgusting propaganda coming from MSNBC that this is Andrea Mitchell, because they have the G7, and I saw this and this caught my interest. They was at Hiroshima, and they was talking about the threat of nuclear war. And I'm gonna let it play, and I'm gonna point out the obvious what is wrong here.
Today in Japan, President Biden and G7 leaders met with a survivor of the atomic bomb that destroyed Hiroshima in August 6, 1945. Kiko Agura was 8 years old, playing outside her home when the bomb fell, knocking her unconscious. 78 years later, she's now 86 years old and still working as a translator and a peace activist, dedicated to keeping the survivors' stories alive. Today's G7 summit is highlighting efforts to rid the world of nuclear weapons, with growing concern about Russian threats to use smaller battlefield nuclear weapons in Ukraine.
Huh? Wait, hold. Let me get this straight. Japan, as I told you guys for over a year now, the biggest cuck nation that's out there, and not the Japanese people's fault. It's the right-wing neoliberal government that kowtowed and bowed their head to U.S. imperialism. Do you guys realize what they just did? So a group of G7 nations with the United States met in Hiroshima to virtue signal about nuclear war. Hey, fuckface, it was the United States that nuked Japan, not Russia. You guys want to know the only country that dropped a nuclear bomb? The only country that dropped a nuclear bomb was the United States on Japan. But they met with Japanese leaders to talk about how Russia is the bad guy and how they're a nuclear threat. You guys see how just like all capitalists everywhere, especially the people that come from who side with the oppressor. When Japan lost in World War II, the United States had essentially occupied it, had a very strong presence in their politics. Shinzo Abe, the former president who was just assassinated, was good friends with Nero Tanden. That was a giant thing. They had a lot of photo ops. They were very, very close friends with the Hillary Clintons. So just like many former enemies of Western imperialism, you have the preferred capitalist class take over because the United States will prop them up, and then they will sell their people out to the government, to the United States in the war machine. So in Japan, because capitalism rots our society, they have their own unique challenges and threats. Look at the depression rates. Look at the suicide rates, especially among the youth. In Japan, there's a giant problem with the youth not being able to succeed in the system. There's a giant mental health crisis. There's a giant loneliness crisis in Japan. There's a wage theft problem in Japan. There's an overtime problem in Japan. A lot of people watch too much anime. They think Japan's a great place. Nah, they got a lot of labor issues in Japan, and it's negatively affecting their youth, their birth rate. So many problems going on in Japan. And dialectical materialism teaches us that capitalism shows and rears its ugly heads in different societies in different ways based on their cultural experience, based on history and many different factors. We see the negative influence of capitalism on Japan. It's been a complete failure. The youth is horrible. I see you, Ron. What's popping, brother? What's popping?
Oh, no, I'm just listening.
I'm showing this segment on Japan. I'm gonna give you, Ron. Actually, I'll put it down real quick. I want to see what's popping, Ron. What's good? I appreciate you joining us.
Well, I made it.
Yeah, good to have you here. So I can't wait to get your take on this story as well, because we just now got scratching the surface of the disgustingness. Rome, I don't know if you saw, but you have Japan and the United States and G7 leaders meeting in Hiroshima. You know the place the United States bombed and nuked? And then they talking about like, we got to stand up against the threat of nuclear war. Look at how evil Russia is. Hey, last time I checked, Russia defeated the Nazis. Russia did not nuke Japan like you guys did. And this statement get even more disgusting. Look at what this guy is going to. I don't want to spoil it. This is horrific.
Joining me now is Newsweek's former Washington Bureau chief
This guy puts on one of the top 10 most unhinged performances I have seen on MSNBC in our recent coverage. And that says a lot. Listen to this unhinged maniac.
Evan Thomas, the author of so many books, but the new book is Road to Surrender, 3 Men and the Countdown to the End of World War II. Evan, I learned so much from your book already. it's just fascinating about the painful, the stress on the deciders, on Henry Stimson.
Henry Stimson's in his diary, he would refer to the atom bomb as the awful, the terrible. They knew how terrible this thing was,
and they still
but they
used
felt
it.
they had to use it because there was no choice. The Japanese were just determined to fight to the bitter, bloody end, and an invasion of Japan would have cost hundreds of thousands of American
Hold
lives.
on. Let me
millions of
get this shit
Japanese
straight.
lives.
Hold up.
And this is
Let me get this shit straight. You guys doing a segment raising awareness over the threats and dangers of nuclear war, and then you bring on this psychopath who then justifies the United States using a nuclear bomb on Japan. You cannot make this shit up. And this has been debunked thoroughly throughout the times. The fact that the United States had no choice. And he just brings up this common, because there's been reports, even United States government officials, that says Japan's surrender was imminent in the summer. Now, if you are an imperialist, even if you're not a leftist, it's known that if the United States would have just continued conventional bombing campaigns, the Japanese government would close to surrender. You had Japanese military officials that later went on record and said, yeah, we're pretty much almost done. We're essentially done. And there's many different strategies, negotiation tactics that the United States could have used to prevent nuking Japan. One thing that's often talked about, they could have waited for Russian help, which was easily about to come. Historians talk about this all the time. When the Nazis would start to be defeated, as Russia started to turn the tide, the United States either could have waited for Western backup. They could have negotiated for the emperor to remain and create a ceasefire based on that. These are one of the many things one of the few things I should say that historians say that the United States could have did instead of nuking Japan. But I'm gonna rewind it just 15 seconds because listen to what this psychopath says on a segment that is meant to raise awareness about nuclear war.
They had to use it because there was no choice. The Japanese were just determined to fight to the bitter, bloody end, and an invasion of Japan would have cost hundreds of thousands of American lives and millions of Japanese lives.
And this has been controversial, of course, for decades. But you've done the research on the Japanese side also, with the profile of Togo. And so you're basically profiling three key men.
Yeah, Togo is nobody's ever heard of him. He's a Japanese foreign minister who helped persuade the emperor to throw in the towel. That was hard to do because the word surrender was forbidden in the Japanese government.
No, you want to see what he's doing? He is manufacturing consent. So you're like, okay, it was okay for us to nuke a fucking city full of civilians. This guy is you guys think Trump is worse than this? You guys think anyone is worse than this guy on screen that is trying to sell you on the idea that it was morally justifiable for us to drop a nuke on civilians? I saw this segment. I literally could not believe what I was hearing. Look, this is Zoya. Zoya's love. Zoya's life. The United States dropped the bomb as Japanese retreated on all fronts. The goal was destruction and spectacle to show the Japanese, the Soviets, that this is a great point, Zoya. I'm glad you brought this up. And the whole world, what the potential of the new weapon was. And this is another criticism of the decision to drop the nuclear bomb, because the decision to drop the nuclear bomb was a political one, because they saw the rise of the Soviet Union and they wanted to send the Soviet Union a message that look at what we can do to a civilian city and look at what we are willing to do. So essentially it was a political decision. Are you seriously arguing that we should nuke hundreds of thousands of civilians for that, to send a message to the Soviet Union, which many government officials was called on record saying, yeah, this is what we want to do here? And also another problem with arguing about the nuking of Japan, there's so many of them that you can go over. The decision was deeply seated with racism, anti-Japanese racism. Look at Looney Tunes in the 30s if you want to see how Americans felt about Japanese in the 30s and the 40s. There was a lot of anti-Japanese sentiment, and politicians used that anti-Japanese sentiment in order to justify nuking the country. If you guys don't believe me, the argument that many historians have used is if you think this wasn't based on racism, why not nuke Germany? In Nazi Germany, they did not do that because many Americans did not view the Nazi Germany as inherently evil. But U.S. propaganda managed to convince people that Japanese people were inherently evil. And there were songs, country songs. There was politicians that was caught saying that we need to wipe Japanese people off the map. We just need to bomb Japan, wipe their whole culture and society off. A lot of people don't forget about this.
I mean, Nick, he's saying it himself.
Go ahead, Ron.
He's spinning that same propaganda, you know, to our generation, to our people now. Because what he is doing when he's saying, "Oh, they didn't even have surrender in their dictionary or in their vocabulary," whatever the fuck he said, he's dehumanizing these people. Dehumanizing these people. You can go back at any point. He has been dehumanizing the people of Japan. And this is what we do. You know, we did the same thing with the people of the Middle East, you know, called them terrorists. And we had hate crime going rampant up in America during that time because of people like this, because of the propaganda that they spitting out. And they these people, they make these people think it's justifiable. Like, just because a motherfucker is this way, oh, we got to take them off. Like, no, you could just leave them the fuck alone. But I love what Zoa has said, because I was going to speak on that. They wanted to shut down the USSR. They wanted to show off their nuclear power. They wanted to show off their bombs. And not only that, have another safe haven to go to, because not only did they bomb the shit out of Japan, they basically did a coup on it. They basically run Japan. You know, it's just another island for us now. We stash our weapons. They even have Nazis in their military ranks, just like we have. It's crazy.
Yeah, and the most important reason, there's so many arguments against dropping the nuclear bomb, but I don't know, probably the most important one is the fact that the use of the bomb was illegal. The use of an atomic bomb, look at this. I'll just read it. I think reading is better than me explaining it. Another one of the reasons against dropping the atomic bomb was the League of Nations. On September 39th, 1938, the League of Nations, under the recognized principle of international law, issued an unanimous resolution outlawing the intentional bombing of civilian populations, with special emphasis against bombing military objectives from the air. So if you're just some immoral jackass that believe the law is the world of land, you don't care about the immoralities of government because they should follow the law. If you want law and order, people, right? What the United States did was against international law. Point. Period. Amen. But nope, law and order means nothing when it comes to the United States government and the wishes of imperialism. So I went a little bit longer on the statement, but god damn, this guy is triggering. So I'll play his part one. And I'm pretty much going to wrap this segment up because I want to show you guys what the United States propaganda machine is doing, where they have a sham PR meeting talking about the threats of nuclear weapons. Mm-hmm. Then they bring this guy on to justify the United States nuking Japan. And Japan just sitting there taking it. Neoliberals selling their people out, just taking it. And by the way, as Zoya said, there were Japanese people protesting the G7. Because as I said, this is not a diss on Japanese people. As always when I usually criticize government. Because especially the youth Japanese has been held hostage by harsh neoliberal capitalism. The youth in Japan, just like in the United States, is way more progressive, way more socialist than their parents are. Like when you look into it, but they're politically repressed. Obviously not the exact same as us, because there's small differences, but it's the same similar story. I'm playing this last part, and I'm actually like this it's almost like a mini segment. Then I'm gonna get to the Lula part. I wanted to show back to back insane pro-war propaganda, and I'm gonna show Zelensky at G7. So this is kind of my mini G7 coverage, because Zelensky was at G7 essentially begging for weapons, begging for support in this war, and Lula famously renounced the Ukrainian peace model. I don't want to spoil it too much, but Zelensky was not happy with that. We get to that here soon. We just play a little bit more of this cycle. I want you guys to hear the depravity of our ruling class. And these people will turn around and say, oh my God, we're so much better than Trump. You guys believe this guy? I have no high opinions of Trump, but you guys believe this guy is better than Trump. He has the moral high ground over Trump.
Basically profiling three key men.
Yeah. Togo is nobody's ever heard of him. He's a Japanese foreign minister who helped persuade the emperor to throw in the towel. That was hard to do because the word surrender was forbidden in the Japanese government. They were determined to fight until there was no Japan left. Why? Part of it is a strange death wish, but also they wanted to get good terms. They didn't want to have an occupation, and they thought if they could make the United States bleed.
They didn't want to have an occupation. How dare they not want us to occupy them? So we're going to drop a nuke on the civilians. What the fuck is wrong with these people?
It'd make us really suffer. We'd give up. Togo, who's this sort of dour old gentleman, knew that this war was just going to go on forever and Japan would perish. So he and a little group around him helped persuade the emperor, you got to surrender. They do this at great risk. I mean,
so they persuade him. So they persuade the emperor to negotiate for peace. You guys think you could have did that without the nuke? Which many historians believe is possible because generals and many people got to him. There was many paths to that. Hell, if you are actually pro-human, you could even give concessions. One that meaning I was doing research before this. One historian argued that the United States could simply tell the emperor, like, all right, we won't force you to advocate. We just make you a figurehead, head of state figure. We need a new government, but we're not going to strip you of your titles. And that would have been one way to persuade them to negotiate peace. Many tactics instead of dropping the nuke. That's like the most unhinged. If you put all the options on the table, CJ and Rome, all the options. What's the most unhinged one? Drop the nuke. That was the one.
But that's what we know. That's what we're good for. Is ethnic cleansing. Like that's what we're known for. That's what we're good for, and that's how we bring these people to their knees. You know, and it's crazy because you could have did anything. You could have did anything. They could have just killed him. But no, they go ahead
people argue like even the imperialist argument. Like there's imperialists that's like, man, nukes is too messy, right? So there are imperialists that argue that, hey man, why didn't we just do more conventional bombing? We could just do more conventional bombing that could have led to surrender. So even there are imperialists that don't even agree with the unhinged actions of the United States. I know because I always make sure I read up on the criticism that before this segment. And I saw people that clearly wasn't in line with me politically because this is based on the argument they was making. But even they was like, y'all niggas are tripping. Y'all was tripping on that.
This segment, what I was thinking during this whole segment is how it's telling how imperialists, enslavers retell the story of what they did to people. And this is an example of how, like, you retelling it like they didn't want to surrender, like it's their fault. You know, it's told in the story as if, you know, me, like, you know, you enslaving you was benevolent. Us dropping on this bomb was benevolent because you didn't want to go along with, you know, what we wanted to do, and that's sort of the slant of
look how they
this
whitewash the
book
fight
too.
between the natives. You know, the natives of this land. They whitewashed that fight and that history. They tell us that, you know, these people were savages and this and that, and they worship whatever the fuck. You know, they dehumanize them to make it like, okay, well, I guess we got to kill them. I guess we got to carpet bomb their town.
Like, yeah, that's what they do.